Well, hello everyone, this is Dave Strong from the Schmidt Music Saxophone Shop, and today we're going to talk a little bit about embouchure. Embouchure is the shape that you make with your mouth when you're playing on the saxophone, and there's a lot of facets to it. So in this video, we're going to talk primarily about how much mouthpiece that you take into your mouth when you play. So when we first start playing saxophone, a lot of times that's in grade school band, like 4th, 5th, 6th grade band, we get told, hey, you roll your bottom lip over your bottom teeth, your top teeth go on the mouthpiece, put in some mouthpiece and blow. Now, generally, once we get that first sound, we're going to do one of two things. We're either going to err on the side of caution and just put a little bit of the mouthpiece in our mouth and blow, and that ends up getting a sound like this. Or we end up taking in a whole lot of mouthpiece, and you end up getting a sound a little more like this. Now, if I were a middle school band director, and I was for a short time, and I heard those two saxophone sounds coming out, especially if saxophone wasn't my main instrument, if I was a trumpet teaching band director or a percussionist or something like that, I know which one I would work on first. I'd hear that big honking sound coming out and go, whoa! All right, take a lot less mouthpiece because that's what's going to stick out, especially generally the first band you start in is going to be a concert band, and it's all about blending, and it's a more classical style generally. And yeah, putting in a ton of the mouthpiece into your mouth and honking away, it's going to be harder to control intonation. It's going to be way louder. It's going to stick out like a sore thumb. Now, while the sound I got when I only put a little bit of mouthpiece in my mouth wasn't good, it wasn't great, it would be a lot easier to hide, and it's going to be less noticeable at first. So generally, we have a situation where many saxophone players, myself included, played for a very long time taking way too little mouthpiece in. So I think it's a really important thing. When I started thinking about two things, one was taking in enough mouthpiece, and two was relaxing all of this here and letting the reed vibrate fully, it made my sound way bigger. I went from band leaders telling me, hey, dig in more, man, I can't hear you, or play a little louder, to whoa, you're a really loud sax player. And sure, mouthpiece has effects on that. Sure, your reed does, sure, your horn, all that kind of stuff. But I find if I'm doing well with those two things, if I'm getting enough mouthpiece in my mouth and if I'm staying relaxed, I can get a pretty big sound on most setups. And, it really can project. And it doesn't mean it's always loud, but it does mean I have that volume when I really put some air through the horn. I'm not making the reed fight against me. So, there's some exercises that I really like. When I'm doing long tones, that's one of the biggest things. And I know we had a video about long tones before, but I'll say it and I'll say it again. Long tones, long tones, long tones. It should be part of any sax player's daily routine. But when I'm doing that, I'll try different spots on the mouthpiece. And if you're not used to taking in a good amount of mouthpiece, it's going to feel weird at first. It's going to feel a little blatty. The intonation's going to take a little more time to get used to, but keep with it. If you learn to get that under control, take a look at so many famous sax players. And now, all full disclosure, this is just my opinion, and a more classical player is probably going to lean towards a little less mouthpiece in, but not always. But look at some of the old jazz greats, or look at some of the really people with a big killing sound. They're generally taking in quite a bit of mouthpiece. But that being said, if it's working for you and you're getting the sound you want, don't listen to me. We're all different. We all have different physiology. But if you're finding that it's just you're really working hard and you cannot get a lot of sound, this is one of the biggest things that I'll work with on my students, is just getting enough mouthpiece in your mouth, relaxing. So working on getting enough mouthpiece in your mouth. And then the second part that I talked about is relaxing. How do we work on relaxing? And that's a little bit tougher one. To have a more relaxed embouchure, there's one of my favorite sax players, a guy named Dick Oates, would talk about this. He'd push in a little further, he'd tune a little bit sharp, and then practice his long tones relaxing to play in tune. And having that flexibility, and I've done that on other videos, I believe I showed you where you can practice bending down half steps. If you could be really that flexible, you can kind of keep everything open, and that's going to be your tongue position is relatively lower and your embouchure is relatively looser. You're going to just have a bigger sound. But being able to tune a little sharp, but then practice the play and tune and take in a little more mouthpiece, you're going to make your sound so much bigger without having to go with a crazy high baffle mouthpiece or something like that. So some of the exercises I'll work on, this is going to be some repetition. Check out the long tones video. But doing long tones, specifically looking that I'm having enough mouthpiece in my mouth, and like I said, tuning a little sharp, and then working on playing in tune. So I've got a tuner right here. You can't see it, but this is a little bit what it looks like. And I'll overdo it a little bit and find a sweet spot. What I'll do is I'll play with not enough mouthpiece in, with kind of what I'd say average people mouthpiece, the amount of people put their mouthpiece in their mouth, and I'll try to overdo it, but still control it. I want to see how far I can get that and still have it be a nice controllable sound and in tune. And this is about where I'm pushed in now, but I'm even going to push in a little further, and I'm going to just mess with that a little bit here. Taking a little more. More yet. And you're on. So as I did that, what I noticed is it gets significantly louder the more mouthpiece I take in. It does get quite a bit harder to control, especially when I get way up on there. But I'd love to eventually be able to comfortably control quite a bit of mouthpiece in there. Then again, I do a lot of pop and rock and stuff. If I'm playing more subtle, I do back off a little bit. If I'm playing classical, I back off quite a bit. But I want to have that control at different positions of putting the mouthpiece in, because you can really get a huge, huge sound. I also noticed a couple other things though, because when I'm taking more mouthpiece, I can get more air through. I do run out of air a little quicker. It's a little shakier. It's a little harder to control. The pitch is a little tougher, but find a balance. And especially when you're practicing, one thing I really, really advocate, one thing I always tell students is practice to your limits. Play as crazy loud as you can play as quiet as you absolutely can play, and play as high and as low as you can play. And if it sounds ugly in the practice room, that means you're getting stuff done. If I just play in the practice room and it all sounds pretty, I'm probably just playing more than I'm practicing. Sure, it still does some good, but when I'm really testing my limits, like how loud can I play? How long can I hold out a note? When I'm doing overtone practices, when I'm practicing altissimo, I'm trying to go as ridiculously high as I can go. And it's something I might never use in a performance, but it expands everything. It's really, I find that very useful. If someone in the next practice room is like, what the heck is that guy doing in there? Because it sounds so ridiculous. Probably it's a good practice session for me. So yeah, anyway, that is my biggest tip to a bigger sound. And it takes a little practice at first, and it takes some getting used to. But if you can take enough mouthpiece in and you can be as relaxed as possible, when I finally had that revelation, and I was in my 20s when it happened, my sound got twice as big. And I came back from I was taking a vacation from a cruise ship gig at the time, and I'd gotten some lessons and stuff. And I came back, and right away people were like, wow, how did your sound get so much bigger? And it was such a simple thing that I missed for so long. So I know I'm rambling a little bit, but I can't say it enough. If you can get those two things down, it's going to help your sound overall, especially for a big jazz sounding, that kind of stuff. I am less of a classical player, admittedly. I did do classical back in college, but that's a different ballgame. And that's when you're going to want to be able to take a little less mouthpiece and have it be a little more locked in and blending sound. But the ability to take in more mouthpiece and get that huge sound when you need it has been invaluable for me. So hopefully that helps you. I know this one's a little rambly one, but this is something I really like to hammer home with any students, or when I'm doing working with kids in schools, I'd say 8 out of 10 high school players aren't taking in enough mouthpiece. If you have any other questions, concerns, even if you disagree and you want to have some discussion, reach out to me in the comments below or at the saxophone shop at schmidtmusic.com. Otherwise, everyone, thanks very much, and we'll see you in the next video.